So you should get some paper and pencil or print out or download the worksheets so that you can be writing your own list of convictions down. The chat is shared with other people. We are recording the webinar today, and it will be available to people in the future. So the questions that you ask the panelists under the Q&A feature are private. I'm sorry, I think I said analyst. The panelists, the attorneys, they are private, and the attorneys cannot give you personal legal advice during our program today, but they can tell you what next steps to take and certainly clarify things in the presentation that are confusing. So whatever you type in the chat will be seen by other attendees. What you type question and answer feature will only be seen by panelists. And if you don't know for sure what your crime conviction is, just make a note of it. You're going to have to be filling in exact details as you work on this process over time. And we're going to talk to you about how to get a rap sheet. So I think we'll go ahead and start. My name's Rita Himes. I am staff attorney at Legal Services for Prisoners with Children. We're very excited about this program today. We have 3 excellent attorneys who are some of the few attorneys with experience and expertise in occupational licensing and criminal law, that intersection. So you're fortunate to hear from them today. And we have 2 people directly impacted by the criminal system that have gone through the process of getting a license, and they're going to be sharing their experiences with you right up front, and then sharing their experiences as we go through the law to kind of put a real world life onto it. And one more time, I'm just going to announce to everybody that we are recording this session. The questions you put in will be seen by other attendees. Questions you put in the Q&A feature will be reviewed by the attorney panelists. And we can't give you legal advice, but the questions, they can tell you what's next steps to take and what to, and refer you to legal resources. So we just want to remind everyone there's a Google Drive folder with materials. The link is in the chat. It's right here also, bit.ly AB2138 materials. If you have the worksheets printed out, that would be great. Otherwise, you try to have paper and pencil with you. That will help. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves, name, organization, and what your interface is with this issue. And then these first 2 panelists will be talking about their experience in more detail very quickly. So Oscar.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Oscar, and I'm the national organizer for All of Us or None. And my tie to this issue is that I initially applied and it was denied for an insurance broker's license.
Thanks. Heidi?
Hi, everybody. My name is Heidi De Leon, and I currently work at Los Angeles Centers for Alcohol and Drug Abuse. I'm also a member of ARC, Anti-Recidivism Coalition, and my connection to this is that being formerly incarcerated, I got out and wanted to become a social worker. And as you know, to become a social worker or work in that as a therapist, I needed to get my license as a ASW, Associate Clinical Social Worker. And I was able to pass licensure with felony convictions and having been to prison.
Thank you. Vinuta Naik.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be with you tonight. My name is Vinuta Naik. I also go by Vina. I'm an attorney at Community Legal Services in East Palo Alto. And my experience is helping people with post-conviction relief, whether it's getting what's commonly called an expungement or a 1203.4 dismissal and other record relief, and also representing people who are going through the process of getting an occupational license and if they're denied going to hearing. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And Felicia.
Good evening, everybody. Felicia Espinosa with Root and Rebound in our Fresno office. I work on similar issues that we're going to talk about today regarding record cleaning, but very much occupational licensing, and also support women who are navigating different systems. So be it family law, a lot of family law and employment litigation as well. So thank you for having me.
Great. And CT.
Hi, everyone. I'm CT Turney-Lewis. I'm a staff attorney with the New Way of Life Reentry Project down in Los Angeles. And the legal work that I do there is, like everyone else, a lot of reentry work, and also the occupational licensing, representing folks that are trying to get their licenses. And at Animal, we also do some other litigation work around helping folks achieve economic security when dealing with a past license. Or past conviction, sorry.
Okay, great. Thank you all for being here.
Rita, real quick,
yeah.
The translator asked us if we could speak a little slower so she could translate easier.
Okay, we'll do our best. This is the outline of the program today. First, we'll be hearing from Oscar and Heidi just in a narrative way, telling their stories of what it was like to pursue their licenses. Then the bulk of the webinar is going to be covering relevant legal information. We'll go over the use of the worksheets and how we're going to handle questions, certain legal shorthand we're going to use. We're going to talk about, what the problem is, why it's so difficult to get these licenses, and what it was like before this new law went in. And some boards are not covered by the new law, so they're still in that old law space. Then we'll go over what the new law does. And then we'll talk about the process of what do you do to get your license, which is first clear your record to the greatest extent possible, apply for the license, and appeal if you're denied. We'll close with a to-do list and questions and answers. So Oscar, you're on. Oscar will talk for 5 minutes about his experiences.
Good afternoon, everyone, again. So my experience, I was interested in getting an insurance broker's license. And so in terms of that, I went to the school, applied for the license, seen that I was supposed to submit my convictions on misdemeanors and felonies, which I have both. And so I ended up getting my rap sheet. When I got my rap sheet, I didn't know how to read it. So I ended up going to the Alameda County Public Defender's Office because I was in the midst, or just recently had dispossessed one of my cases. And in any sense, I was able to talk with them, and we reviewed my rap sheet. Based on that, I applied for the license and submitted an explanation for each of my convictions. And then I was denied. What ended up happening is that they denied me on two things. One is that they said I had a clear disregard for the law based on the number of convictions that I had. And then the other thing was that based on inaccurate reporting, because in my rap sheet, there was 2 convictions back in '92 that I had forgotten about, and it wasn't on my rap sheet that I ended up having or I didn't report. And so because of that, I was denied. What I ended up doing was going through a pro bono law firm. And with that, the consultation, they said that first things first, that I should go through an expungement process where I ended up having to get my certified copies of all my convictions in the 3 different counties that I had convictions on or with. Then I also got letters of support, meaning things documenting things like rehabilitation, in terms of schooling. And so I got certificates of diploma basically on my AA degree. And I also got school transcripts in terms of show my grade point average. I also have been doing organizing since 2000. So I was able to get letters of support from different folks that I mentored along the way, and just community involvement that I had with my organizing work. And then I also had employment prospects. So with my employer that I was employed in terms of doing insurance work, they also wrote a letter. Through that, I went to each of the counties with the attorney, the pro bono attorney, and was able to expunge and dismiss all my felony convictions and misdemeanors. And just to be clear, my felony convictions were wobblers. And so that gave me the ability to be able to reduce them to misdemeanors. With that, after that, my attorney or my pro bono attorney filed an appeal with the California Department of Insurance in order for me to dispute the denial. And I used the same expungement mitigating info that I mentioned earlier in terms of the brief or the motion that was filed for the appeal. Part of the appeal was from the attorney that I was working with to prepare me for testimony, because they said that I should expect for me to go on the stand and talk about my rehabilitation and all my convictions. That was hard for me. One main reason is because they were asking me to talk about my remorse of the crimes the felony convictions that I had. And to be honest, I didn't have remorse. And so I had a hard time thinking about that and how to message that or how to articulate that. In any case, the attorney was really good and basically steered me through that process, talked to me about the attorney, when you give testimony, you should just answer the question and not try to move forward with whatever else that you might think that you need to say, and just let the attorney steer you in however they're going to steer you. For me, the outcome, and I'm sorry, just to let you know, like the process took a good, I believe almost like 8 months to 9 months from beginning in terms of getting my rap sheet, filling out the application, all the way to the appeal of the conviction. Appeal of the denial. And so the outcome was that when we were actually going to go to court the day of, the opposing attorney that was opposing my denial or my appeal said that they were willing to give me a five-year probationary license. And I said, why 5 years? And so can we do 3 years or something less? And so they gave me a 4-year deal, and that's what ended up happening.
Thank you. Heidi?
Hey, everybody. So mine, I guess I can go down the timeline so you can get a picture of that. But the last time I was arrested and was in jail was in 2006. And from there, I was in state prison and in and out of all of the prisons back then, as well as the county jail. As far as my convictions, I had a lot of misdemeanors. I don't remember how many, but there were about 6 felonies. One of them was an assault on a peace officer, and I bring that up because a lot of people ask what is deemed violent or nonviolent and if they're able to get licensing. But that's what I had on my record. And then I had criminal threats and a few other charges. So from 2006 to 2009, I was able to work and got myself into school, and that's when I became a drug counselor. And I've been working in addiction treatment now for almost 10 years, and I saw the move to where I needed to become a clinical therapist. And there was a lot of fear in trying to do that or move towards approaching the BBS, which is the Board of Behavioral Sciences. to get my license because I was really sure that I wasn't going to get approved because of my record. But then I started hearing stories of others who was able to get approved and got through the process. So I want to say, after I got my bachelor's and went into my master's degree, I decided I was going to take the chance and just try to get my license irregardless, because there was other work that I could do if I couldn't. And I got my MSW from USC in 2018. And after that, I reached out to a few different professors at USC who were able to help me out. And they connected me to A New Way of Life. And A New Way of Life they have amazing lawyers there who can help you out. And I was convinced I couldn't get some of my convictions reduced to misdemeanors because I had gone to prison on them. But they were able to get them dismissed. I forget what the penal code is, but they were able to get them dismissed. And in the same time frame, in 2017, the end of 2017, I worked with my lawyer at A New Way of Life and was able to get those dismissed. I still had 2 felonies and got my, certificate of rehabilitation as well. So I was able to get a copy of my certificate of rehabilitation plus all of the court records, because back then we needed to get every single document that was associated with any arrest and submit that to the board. It was a pretty thick packet that I had to submit to the state licensing. And at the time, I had multiple counties as well, and I had to go to every arresting agency, get a copy of the police report, or try to get a copy of the police report. I took a picture of myself outside of the police station to prove that I went to try to get these reports because they wouldn't give them to me. And I'm in Los Angeles County, which is where most of my convictions were. And if you deal with them, they won't give you copies of things. So they'll give you a generic letter that you submit with the licensing. And I basically built my packet and submitted that. I included my certification as an addiction counselor and letters that I had from my certificate of rehabilitation, as well as all of my certifications that I've gathered, trainings, proof of my work, and submitted that with my packet. I submitted my packet, I want to say in March of 2018. And I got a letter back saying that I had forgotten to mention something. In their terms, it was a falsification of a record. And for me, I didn't even know that that charge was there. I went through my whole DOJ report. It was not there. And so I submitted another letter basically saying, I'm not trying to say I didn't do it. I more than likely did that. And it was 20 years ago. And it was not even a misdemeanor. It was an infraction that they were talking about. And then 2 weeks later was granted my BBS number without probation or any restrictions on my license. So, and that was pretty fast. Mine took about 8 weeks to get my number, which I think because of the timing, a lot of people, it takes longer because grad school's getting out and then they get swamped. But with the BBS, they send all packets to the criminal conviction, like the criminal convictions person who reviews it. And that's historically been one person who goes through every single application. And since then, I've submitted it and been able to practice. So.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. So now we're going into the legal information section. We want to remind you again to use the worksheets during the webinar. They're available at the link that we added to the chat. And just want to let you know that the worksheets are just designed to help you get started getting a picture of what will be involved in getting your license. You need to consult with an attorney. We'll be repeating that several times. We can't give you personal legal advice during this webinar, but each licensing board has its own set of rules, and every criminal record is different. So, and there are resources out there. So we really encourage you early on in the process to seek out legal advice. And so now to start us on the legal section will be Felicia.
Yes, thank you, Rita. So, and thank you, Oscar and Heidi, for sharing and kicking us off. Very much for everybody, if there's anything to add during any of the slides, please just unmute yourself, panelists, and add to it. So thank you. And to confirm what Rita said, in terms of any specific advice, very much in our materials, we have a list of legal providers that provide free legal services. You should very much reach out to them. And there's also, we'll confirm at the end, some clinics that are coming up, which are great opportunities for that. So we look forward to hearing directly from each and every one on this call. So to kick us off, just some legal shorthand and just some language that you might be hearing you've heard some of it already from Oscar and Heidi, and you'll hear from us attorneys as well. So you'll hear us use, and everyone knows and he has heard the language about AB 2138. AB 2138 very recently went into effect, right? It went into effect just a few months ago, starting July 1, 2020. Today, we will be discussing applications only. So this is if you yourself are applying applying to be part of a board, applying to be a license. This is not a webinar about revocations or suspensions. That means you've already been licensed and the board is taking action against you to try to either revoke it or suspend that license. Today, it's very much about new license applications. We'll also use the term license broadly. We're using the word license as a shorthand for exemptions when we're talking about Department of Social Services, clearances, credentials, and an actual license. But we're using that language license for any procedure where a person's conviction history may come up and be a barrier for their occupation. And we're using the term board also to be a board, an agency, a bureau, a commission, a department. So any licensing board, and any licensing body, I should say, we're using the term board. Again, the disclaimer that laws change. Not only are laws different based on what your conviction history is and based on what board you're in front of, and based on what time period that, that you're applying. So that's why it's very important for you to get one-on-one information from a lawyer based on your specific application. So today we cannot give true legal advice. Please consult an attorney. Briefly, we want to just talk about the scope of the occupational licensing. So occupational licensing is actually about 30% of jobs here in require some form of licensing. And 1 in 3 Californians, or about 8 million Californians, have an arrest or criminal record, which may be a barrier for that licensing. As we know, employment is the number one most important factor when we're talking about recidivism and being able to provide for a family is stable employment. So that's why this is so important. Why we all as an organization not only do direct services, but very much policy to make sure that people have access to stable employment. The other reason why it's so crucial is because licensing, well, the criminal legal system, right, is racist. It disproportionately impacts Black, Indigenous, and people of color and Latinos. And licensing barriers are based on this racist system, right? So we know surveys, we just know that, and now we have the statistics to prove it. In terms of the likelihood when it comes to Black, Indigenous people and Latinos, and in the disproportionate amount of times that they're being incarcerated or having police involvement, which then impacts that stable employment. There is a great, the NELP has a great survey about it, a great report that we encourage everybody to read, and it can potentially be used in terms of talking about that, that disproportionate impact that the criminal legal system has on us, right? Next. So before AB 120,
All right, so, yeah, this
Okay.
section, we're talking about the
So,
law in place.
Today, so before,
Sorry,
it's okay.
go ahead, Felicia.
So we did want to talk about like the term substantially related. What it mostly says is substantially related is a pretty broad term in that it's possible for boards to be able to link it in, right? There's a lot of wiggle room there when it comes to that term of whether the conviction is substantially related to the employment or substantially related to the job. There's a lot of wiggle room there for the boards, right? It's not defined, it's broadly interpreted. One of the guides that we use in terms of insurance license can be denied for convictions of felonies. If it's substantially related, the language is there, and the statute, the law is there if you want to see it specifically. But there's a lot of wiggle room there, and that's why before AB 2138, before there's even more clear distinctions of what can or cannot be considered, was even more harmful, right, to our people because of that. Convictions last forever, right? You'll hear a lot in terms of rap sheets, and we'll talk about what a rap sheet is, but your convictions last forever, right? And the rap sheets are one of those. Usually clients have to disclose all of their convictions on applications. What we would see is a lot of time before, this is all before AB 2138, and still for the boards that don't have AB 2138, it may not be the actual conviction, but they would call it you're dishonest, you failed to disclose, right? So we call it the dishonesty trap. They're saying it's not necessarily the conviction we have a problem with, it's the fact that you failed to disclose it, right?
I'm going to interject. This is kind of what Heidi was talking about. Heidi, I don't know if you want to repeat that, that she didn't remember a conviction and then you're accused of dishonesty, and you were able to overcome that. But do you want to share again what happened?
Basically, there was the charge that they found on my DOJ report that wasn't on the copy that I had, said in 1999, I lied to a police officer or gave him a false name. And the form they sent me said I falsified my application. So I had to send a letter back apologizing and saying I more than likely did it and don't remember because it was 20 years ago.
Thank you. Both. Thank you, Rita, for highlighting that. But yeah, so that is the dishonesty trap. So boards may consider broad ranges of convictions or adverse actions. That what says regardless of age of conviction, that means before they would be able to go back to the 90s, right? The main thing that would stop somebody is if it is a juvenile case, right? So if we're talking about stuff that happened while you were convicted as a minor. But besides that, they could go back to the 90s to ask about your conviction histories. They may be able to consider convictions that have had record cleaning processes, that have been expunged, that have had CORs, that have been dismissed. This also would include arrests and diversion programs. So these were considerations that were happening prior to AB 2138 and still for the boards, generally still for the boards that are not covered by AB 2138.
So I'm going to interject here just on worksheet 1, if you have that printed out, or anyway on the notes you're taking, you want to, as we go through the next slides, you want to try to figure out if the board you want to apply to is covered by AB 2138. We're not going to be able to cover all of them, but we took note of what people said when they registered, and hopefully we'll cover the ones you are interested in, and you can obviously follow up with legal referrals afterwards.
And the translator, Angelica, asked if panelists could please slow down for translation purposes.
Sorry. Felicia.
Yes. And to confirm, the worksheets are very much in preparation. Again, consult with an attorney, and this will help you for that first consultation to get you going, to get you ready for the questions that we would ask, right? And the questions that when you sit down with us, we're hoping to get through. They're great to get that first consultation ready ready to run. Okay, so common boards that are not covered by AB 2138, insurance, right? So insurance is the main one. CNAs. So CNAs and home health aides are still not covered by AB 2138. You'll hear about ones that are in the similar field that are covered by AB 2138, but not CNAs and not health home aides. TWIC, which I believe CT is more familiar with, is not covered by AB 2138. Transportation Worker Identification Credential. And the big one that's not covered by AB 2138 is the Department of Social Services criminal exemption. So you'll need a clearance, you'll need an exemption for your convictions when it comes to working or operating a DSS licensed facility, home care aides that are working there, child placement through the foster care system. So the DSS criminal exemption is one that we see regularly and one that still is not covered under what we're going to learn about we'll learn about soon. Let me see, boards, and these are the boards covered by AB 2138. So boards that have to follow Business and Professions Code 480. So this includes most boards under the Department of Consumer Affairs. So you have a fact sheet on that drive that is on the chat, that's on the Q&A, that includes a fact sheet about AB 2138 that has a lot of this information in terms of which ones are covered, and then these limited exemptions for the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education, State Athletic Commission, California Horse Racing Board. Those are also on that fact sheet. And that fact sheet is a great resource, which also ends with the free legal nonprofits that work on these issues and who you can talk to specifically about your case.
I'm just going to add that there's also a link to this website in the Google Drive, so you can look at the list of boards under the DCA. Okay, thank you so much, Felicia. And now Vinuta is going to go over the changes that come with AB 2138. And if you have worksheet 2 printed out, you might be able to fill in for your convictions as we're going through the various rules, but don't worry about it if you can't keep up, because you'll have the materials to look at, and this is an initial, just a preliminary look at your situation, and you'll be getting, and again, we encourage you to get legal help to really get reliable step-by-step information. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk about AB 2138 and what changes it enacts. So as Felicia said, AB 2138 applies to boards that follow Business and Professions Code Section 480. That includes most boards under the Department of Consumer Affairs. And the changes that it makes are that most of those boards cannot deny licensure on the basis of if the convictions are older than 7 years, or if your release from incarceration is older than 7 years. So you may have to look at the date of release from incarceration in order to calculate that 7-year period, but getting the rap sheet is going to be very useful and helpful to kind of start understanding your record and figuring out those dates. So that's the basic protection of AB 2138. If your conviction is more than 10 years old, for example, if it's a misdemeanor theft, you should be eligible to get a license.
You said 10, do you mean 7?
I use 10 just as a broader example, but
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
if it's more than 7 years old, then you should be protected under AB 2138. The exceptions to the 7-year rule, meaning that these convictions can be considered indefinitely, are serious felonies under Penal Code Section 1192.7, parentheses C, or convictions that require a Tier 2 or Tier 3 sex offender registration under Penal Code 290, and that law will go into effect in January 2021. So unfortunately, those are 2 exceptions to that 7-year rule. Yes, Rita?
I just want to note that we have links to these laws in the in that Google Drive as well. If you want to, look for your convictions in there. Again, you're going to want to get it double checked by an attorney.
Great. So there's an additional 3rd exception to the 7-year rule, which is for felony financial crimes. And those felony financial crimes apply to 6 boards as listed: the California Board of Accountancy, the Contractor State License Board, the Professional Fiduciaries Bureau, the Bureau of Security Investigative Services for Investigators, the Cemetery and Funeral Bureau, and the Department of Real Estate. So if you have a felony financial crime, that is again an exception to the 7-year rule. And we're going to talk about criminal record clearance a little bit later on. But I want to note that if it's a felony that's eligible to be reduced to a misdemeanor, if you can reduce it, you should argue that you are outside of that 7-year exception, and you should be eligible for the license if you can reduce it to a misdemeanor. So most boards also cannot deny licensure on the basis of convictions that have been dismissed per Penal Code Section 1203.4, .4a, .41, and .42. These are commonly called expungement. I personally don't use the word expungement because to me it means that the conviction is erased from your record, and California law does not erase your conviction history. So I want to be very clear that expungement does not mean erasure. If you have received a certificate of rehabilitation or a pardon, that conviction also protects you under AB 2138. And if you have an arrest that did not lead to conviction, diversion, deferred entry of judgment, infractions, citation, or juvenile adjudications, all of those should be protected and cannot be considered under AB 2138. Lastly, if the person suffered formal discipline by a licensing board inside California or outside of California that is older than 7 years, or if that discipline by the Occupational Licensing Board was dismissed per Penal Code Section 1203.4, that history cannot be used against the person. So say, for example, this is like a pharmacy tech who was convicted of a misdemeanor and lost their pharmacy license. If they then went and got that misdemeanor dismissed per 1203.4, they apply again to the pharmacy tech board, I believe that should not be used against them. And actually I need to double check if pharmacy is covered by AB 2138. So I'll change that to Department of Real Estate. It was Department of Real Estate and they had that same misdemeanor conviction that was dismissed for 1203.4. Department of Real Estate should now not be able to consider that.
Since you're pausing there were 2 questions specifically about whether nurses and teachers are covered by AB 2138. Do you know the answer off the top of your head?
So off the top of my head for nursing, the Board of Registered Nursing and Licensed Vocational Nurses are under AB 2138. For teachers, that would be the teacher credential, and I believe that falls under the Education Code, so not under AB 2138.
Thank you.
So under AB 2138, Felicia also touched on the dishonesty or the candor trap, and Heidi touched on this as well. We have eliminated the boards from asking about criminal history on the license application. So when you apply to a board under AB 2138, They cannot ask about criminal history on the application, but they may ask you to submit mitigating evidence to evaluate the conviction relationship, that substantial relationship. Sorry, I think I got muted there for a second. Let me know if you need me to repeat anything.
Sorry about that. I think that was my mistake. You want to just repeat it? We're okay on time.
No worries. So AB 2138 states that the boards that fall under that law, they cannot ask about criminal history on the license application, but they may ask you to voluntarily disclose mitigating evidence if you so choose. My recommendation would be not to disclose any evidence up front, but rather just apply, let them do the analysis, and then if they come back and say that you have a criminal history that falls outside of AB 2138, at that point you can submit history or evidence.
Is there a danger that if you submit mitigating evidence but leave something out, you can get the dishonesty trap problem?
That's a good question. I don't know because the law is so new, but I wouldn't be surprised. I'm fairly cynical with these types of boards and these types of issues. And I'd also want to run everything by an attorney and just make sure that you're covering yourself before you submit anything.
Thank you.
So exceptions to that non-disclosure rule, unfortunately, there's an exception to that. These 6 boards may ask about criminal history on the application. The California Architects Board, Landscape Architects Technical Committee, Board of Barbering and Cosmetology, Bureau of Household Goods and Services, and the Bureau of Automotive Repair. And I'll just note that beginning in January 2021, the California Architects Board and the Landscape Architects Technical Committee will also run a fingerprint background check as well. So in general, when applying to any licensure, please read the question that is asked very carefully, answer the question that is asked, and try to be as honest and accurate as possible. So the substantial related standard that we talked about before is somewhat more defined under AB 2138, where convictions may only be considered if they're substantially related to the qualifications, duties, or functions of the business or profession for which the application for licensure is submitted. And if we go to the next slide, there are some criteria that help us understand what substantially related means. Those criteria include the nature and gravity of the offense, the number of years elapsed since the date of the offense, the nature and duties of the profession in which the applicant seeks licensure. So it's hard to say for certain that a certain crime is going to bar you from X board. This is the argument that you need to make. I was convicted of X crime. I am applying for X board. These are the job duties of the profession that I would like to go in. And this is how my crime or my rehabilitation says that I am eligible for that license. How do you distinguish that? For those felony financial crimes that I mentioned before, it's a slightly different standard where it should be directly and adversely related to the fiduciary qualifications, functions, or duties of the business or profession. For those 6 boards that may consider felony financial crimes, as I said before, try your best to reduce the felony to a misdemeanor if you're eligible for that reduction, and make the argument that it's not directly and adversely related to the fiduciary qualifications or duties.
Okay, so now we're in the section where we're going to talk about what do you actually do to get this, undergo the process of getting the license. And I'm going to encourage Heidi and Oscar to chime in with their practical experience as we go through this. And Vinuta is going to review this, the importance of getting legal advice early, which I know we've been stressing and we're going to stress again.
Definitely. So we want you to get legal advice as early as possible. If you know today that you would like to get a certain type of license and you have a criminal record or criminal history, we highly encourage you to speak to an attorney well before you begin the process, because we want you to determine if it's worth the investment of time and money and education for that license, and if it's worth the time or money needed to clear your record, or if you're even eligible to clear your record at this time. Further, we want to encourage people to avoid disclosing negative information on the application. As I said, before you submit anything, please run it by an attorney. Make sure that you're answering the question that's asked and answering those questions as accurately and honestly as possible. And you can include mitigating evidence with the initial application, but my sense of it, especially under AB 2138, is you should wait until the board has kind of done the initial review and then determine that you need to present that information.
All right.
And if possible, strive to have legal representation at the hearing. You will be in front of an administrative law judge if your license application is denied, and that functions like a mini trial. So it's best that you have representation or you've at least consulted with someone before you go to the hearing. Next slide, please. So depending on your rap sheet and your record, you might need different attorneys in different counties. So for example, if you have convictions in San Francisco, San Mateo, Alameda, you'll need to work in all 3 counties to clear your record. Don't assume that clearing one is going to help you or clearing the one with the most serious conviction is going to help you. You're going to need to take care of all of it. For the clean slate remedies, what is commonly called expungement, what I call the Penal Code Section 1203.4 dismissal, or other criminal record clearance, you typically will file in the county of the conviction. So again, San Francisco, San Mateo, Alameda, for the example I just gave. For the certificate of rehabilitation, you will file in the county of your residence, or you have the option to file in the county where the conviction occurred under a recent change in the law. And for occupational licensing, depending on where you live, is where you'll be assigned your occupational licensing hearing. So for example, for the person who has a conviction record in San Francisco, Alameda, and San Mateo, they will file for criminal record relief in those 3 counties. But if they've now moved down to San Diego, they would appear for their occupational licensing hearing at the San Diego office. And there are 4 offices across the state, 1 in Sacramento, 1 in Oakland, 1 in Los Angeles, and 1 in San Diego. So depending geographically where you live is where you'll file for occupational licensing. And you can find information on where to get legal representation in the materials. Rita and Oscar have done a really great job putting all of this together. There's also a directory of clean slate clinics by county on the EBCLC website. There are upcoming clinics for rural counties in October 27th to 30th, 2020.
And those,
there's further information.
sorry. Yeah, in the Google Drive is the directory as a link to the directory of the clean slate clinics and a flyer about the virtual clinics.
We also encourage you to get other types of support. So if you would like to work with participatory defense hubs, there's a link and a directory in the materials. There are professional organizations as well that are focused on rehabilitation. The most notable one that we are aware of is the Rehabilitation and Inclusion Council of the National Association of Social Workers in California. So their information is on the slide. And there's also student organizations like Underground Scholars to help support formerly incarcerated people.
So I'm going to ask Oscar to talk about participatory defense because he's in a couple counties on that, and talk about how they can help with this licensure process.
So basically with participatory defense, most hubs that are usually located in different counties of the state, not all states are represented, but there's a directory of the ones that are. And in the time of COVID, we are working with folks that are outside the county because we can, because of the Zoom meetings capability. In any case, we work with folks and we meet once a week, and then throughout the week we work on the work plan that's developed during the community meeting. And so we can work with folks on expungement or as Vinuta said, she don't like to call it expungement, but it's some kind of suppression of that information for employment purposes. In any case, we can work with folks on that, and so please consult the different on the directory, the email the person that's listed on there. Say that you want to do an expungement process for on your record, and then we could work with you on that. And basically, it's free of charge, so there's no fees involved. It's a community effort to help folks address the issues of the injustice of the criminal justice system.
Great. And then Heidi is on this council of the NASW. And if you can talk about your internship, the support you got at the internship stage.
Oh, yes. So going into the MSW, I knew I was going to have to apply for to work at different agencies. And I got blindsided because I thought it would be okay going into like gang intervention and addiction treatment, that I would be accepted, but I wasn't, and was told I couldn't because of my criminal record. I was able to get my internship at Homeboy Industries, where I've worked now I worked with them as a part of LACADA, doing their addiction treatment program. And obviously they're very second chance friendly, as I'm trying to think of the term, but able to take anybody with a criminal record, regardless of what it was. And being on the Rehabilitation and Inclusion Council, so if you email the RI Council on there, it's a group of us. Many of us are formerly incarcerated, some of us are not, but we're all part of the network of schools that have people going out to internships. They also have different trainings as well of how to get the exemptions for DPSS, like to work in group homes or different clearances that you would need or exemptions. So definitely, if you want further guidance, email them or check out the website, and they can also provide you with assistance there. I also put my information on the side so you can email me, and then I can get you connected to somebody, because we have people all over California who can help you out.
And then didn't you also get help in the school setting?
Oh, yes. Yes, so we started realizing, I went to USC, and obviously there's not a lot of people. I'm really open about having been formerly incarcerated, and I realized the more I talked about it, more people were able to talk about it as well. And we had a lot of people coming out with this struggle of being formerly incarcerated, but wanting to be in social work, and realizing that we're being turned down from a lot of different internships and jobs. And there was one professor there, her name is Susan Hess, who kind of piloted how to coach people through these interview sessions and use our past as our strengths and not something that's going to hinder us. And we helped start the Unchained Scholars at USC. And since then, we've just been putting it out there, getting as many people as possible to know that you can get through occupational licensing with your past record. And even with some convictions, I know the more serious ones that they say automatic might be a no to go in as an MSW work as a social worker. You can use it in more than just licensing. You can operate a nonprofit, you can do the organizational work. So there's a lot of options.
Thank you. And now we're going to talk about the first big step is clearing your record, and CT will lead us in this.
Hello, everyone. I hope you are all still awake and with us. Not meant to be a commentary on my fellow panelists, just the nature of Zoom and sitting and watching a webinar for, a good hour and a half here. The first step in clearing your record is a little more complicated if you have an actual active criminal case. So if you have an actual criminal case that's active, whether that is you're facing charges that haven't been resolved yet, or you're still on probation or parole for a case where you've already, been through the sentencing phase, you'll want to get legal advice from an attorney about the specific impact of having an active case, because having an active case can be kind of a different situation from if you have a past case. So obviously the best thing to do would be, if you haven't been convicted of it yet, to avoid that conviction or to seek some sort of diversion. And as you're going through your case, if you're on probation, you'll want to consider the impact that outstanding fines and fees may have on down the road things such as trying to get clean slate remedies or trying to apply for a license. So a lot of my clients that I see don't really think about the fact that if they haven't paid off their restitution, it doesn't look as good when they're then later on trying to apply for a license. So even if you aren't able to fully pay something off, just trying to do what you can to make some payments towards it will go a long way down the road towards getting your clean slate remedies and trying to get your license later. Okay, we can go to the next slide, Rita. So for past convictions, your first step is you're going to want to get a clear idea of what your conviction history is. A lot of people honestly don't know exactly what they were convicted of, or what happened to them in each case, right? I think we all have the experience that the criminal system isn't exactly set up to let people understand what's happening to them. I think that happens to a lot of people. You just kind of get processed through, and then one day you're told to leave. So the best way to do that is to get, if you're assuming that all your cases are in California, to get your California rap sheet from the California Department of Justice. If you're already working with an attorney, they may be able to get your rap sheet for you without any cost. If you're not, or they're not able to get it, you can get your rap sheet yourself by having your own fingerprints taken. There is a fee to do that. We have some information here on the PowerPoint and also in our, I think on the to-do list, I think it is, on how to get your rap sheet. It's the same information in the packet and on this PowerPoint, but basically there's two parts to the fee. There's a $25 Department of Justice fee, which can be waived through an online fee waiver. And then there will be the fee for the fingerprint operator to actually take your fingerprints. Unfortunately, that part can't be waived. Rita, can we back up one, please?
Sorry.
And then once your fingerprints are taken, then the rap sheet will be mailed to you. Yeah.
Slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, we might need to summarize a little.
Sure. So here is a list of the different clean slate remedies that are available for folks, depending upon what your current situation is and what the situation is with each of your cases. It's possible for arrests that didn't lead to a conviction to get different types of sealing for those. If you're still on probation, you may be able to get your probation terminated early. You can get different types of, like Vinuta said, most people call them expungement, but they're actually different types of set aside and dismissals. Certain convictions, if they're felonies, can be reduced down to misdemeanors. And some misdemeanors under the marijuana legalization laws can get reduced down to infractions or even dismissed. And you can also try to seek a certificate of rehabilitation or a pardon. Okay? So as part of preparing to get your record cleaned up, you'll want to begin gathering evidence of your rehabilitation. So some of this is just facts that you'll be able to show to the court, but some of it is stuff you'll want to gather up. So think about what certificates or trainings or classes that you've gone through that you can get certificates for. Even if you've done volunteering somewhere and they gave you like a little thank you letter or a little thank you certificate, any classes that you've taken where you've gotten a certificate at the end, keep that all together. And also think about just kind of the ways in your everyday life that you kind of go about things a little bit differently than you did maybe when you got your convictions. Those are going to be the types of things that really speak to a licensing board and also to the court. For example, I work with a lot of clients who, when I ask them, what are they doing now? And they're like, well, I don't really do anything. But then when I talk about how they spend their days, it comes out that they help take care of their grandparent, or they check in on their neighbor, or they watch their sister's kids. So those types of things really show, the court, that community connection and connection with your family and people around you that can be helpful. And you'll also want to think about the people in your life that you may want to ask to provide letters of support for you. Go ahead, Rita. And we also have some stuff in the rehabilitation packet in the materials, at the materials link, some more information on what to pull together. And if you've been to a participatory defense clinic, they probably helped you pull together a social bio that can be helpful in this process also. Go ahead, Rita. Okay. So then the next step is going to be just applying for the license. When you're applying for the license, ideally this will happen after you've gotten, most of your clean slate stuff taken care of. But if you are already applying for the license and you haven't gotten it, then it's not too late. Go ahead and still pursue your clean slate remedies, even if you have to already apply for your license. The most important thing is that you want to avoid the dishonesty trap at the application stage. So you want to make sure you know, A, what's on your record, and that you also know what you do and don't have to disclose on your application. And that'll depend upon the facts of your convictions. So how old are they? What clean slate remedies have you gotten? And what license are you applying for? And this is where an attorney will also come in really handy. So you'll want to check in with an attorney even before you apply to make sure that you're ahead of the game right from the get-go. The other point about applying for the license is a lot of times on the application, they'll ask you to submit information about your convictions, but they won't specifically tell you to provide that rehabilitation and mitigation evidence. But go ahead and send it right away anyway. Don't wait for them to ask for it. Send everything that you've helped pull together, and that'll just help you right from the beginning in going through your application. Go ahead to the next slide. Now, in terms of getting letters of support, and this applies for your license and also for your clean slate stuff, think about quality over quantity. So I've had some clients that have come in with, a bunch of, printed out emails that are about one sentence long, and they don't really provide any information. They just say, Joe Smith is a great person. Those aren't going to be nearly as helpful as a few really solid letters from people that have made it clear that they know you and they're aware of your convictions and your history, but also can explain why, even though they know about your convictions, they still, are willing to be that support. It's best if they will put on it that they're writing it under penalty of perjury. But even, even for the initial application process, even just a regular letter is helpful. Okay. And folks that you'll want to consider seeking letters from, if you're active in your faith community, that's always a great place to look for some support. Law enforcement. So if you are one of those rare people that ended up with a really strong relationship with your PO or, something like that, that would be helpful. People who know you really well and have known you for a long time. So maybe they knew you at the point when you had your convictions and now, and they can kind of talk about how your life has changed. And also, a former client. So if you've already been doing some work, doing, childcare or helping, caretake for other people, and you have people who can say, yes, Joe Smith had, took care of my mom for, 5 years, and our family couldn't have gotten by without him, and he was a great help to us, and we would trust him, forever. Something like that would be great also. Go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so no matter how great your application is, there is always a chance that you're going to be denied your license up front. In fact, before 2138 passed, I generally told my clients to prepare and expect to be denied up front and to have to appeal it. You may not be denied up front, But if you are denied upfront with your application, it's frustrating, it stinks, but it's not the end of the road. And don't think that just because you were initially denied, it's not possible for you to get your license. The thing to understand is when you get that letter of denial is you usually have a very short time window to preserve your ability to appeal the denial. I slipped a little bit into lawyer speak there. I try not to do that. Sorry. So you basically, you'll have usually maybe a week or two. I think a lot of times the limit is, 15 days, maybe 30 days, to tell the board that you want to appeal the denial. So make sure that you read whatever notice you get very carefully to know how long you have. And get a hold of an attorney as soon as you can, because this is really the part where if you haven't already been working with one, an attorney is really going to be helpful in seeing what can you challenge with the denial, and what's the best approach to take. If you are not able to find an attorney right away, it's important to still contact the board, however they've told you to do that, and tell them that you want to appeal. For the vast majority of licenses at this point, you don't need to pull together a big, fancy, in-depth appeal packet. Literally at this point, all you're doing is telling the board, I want to appeal. And that keeps the process rolling and keeps that chance alive for you. Go ahead. So if the board that you're applying for a license with falls under AB 2138, there are certain requirements the board has to meet when they deny your license. They have to notify you in writing of the fact that you've been denied, what the procedure is to appeal or to request a reconsideration, and I believe they have to tell you what the specific basis of the denial is. And also the fact that you have the right to get the complete conviction history from the board and question whether or not the conviction history they have is accurate. So what does happen sometimes is that the board may get outdated information from the Department of Justice. So you'll want to make sure that the information the board got is actually accurate and complete. Go ahead to the next slide, Rita. So usually the appeal process will end up at what we call an administrative hearing. Most boards go right to what we call a formal hearing, but some boards, most notably that I'm aware of, the Board of Security and Investigative Services, so they do the guard cards, they will often provide the option for an informal hearing. Both are probably going to be more formal than what you're expecting. If you go to a formal hearing, particularly, like I think somebody mentioned, it's going to be a mini trial. There will be a judge, there will be opposing counsel, the department's going to have an attorney there, there will be a witness stand, you will get on the witness stand and you will have to testify under oath. So it's not going to be a situation where, you're just going in to talk to the board members. A lot of my clients, are very surprised by what we end up going through. And you may be told that you don't need a lawyer, but you really do. I have met very few people who have gone through the formal hearing process without a lawyer and been successful in their appeal. We can go to the next slide. Now, before the hearing happens, the thing that kicks off the administrative hearing process is the board will file a statement of issues, which is basically their formal legal reasons for denying you the license. And the reply, just like with the appeal, you have to act very quickly to file the notice of defense. Now, again, this is not a big, long, drawn-out, statement. This is literally just you sending back a notice or your lawyer sending back a notice that says, yes, I want to defend the license. I want to defend myself and try to get my license. That notice usually has to be sent back in within 15 days. And then before the hearing, you or your lawyer will also go through discovery, which is the board sending you reports that they have. Also, you may need to be sending the board things that you submitted. So for your clean slate remedies, things that you other times when you have formally talked about your convictions. But if you're working with an attorney, your attorney will handle all that process for you. We can go ahead to the next slide. So at the hearing, by far the most important part of the hearing is going to be your testimony. It's not like a criminal court where you have the right to not testify. If you don't get on the stand yourself or your lawyer doesn't call you, the department has the right to call and examine you. And your own testimony is really going to be your best and most impactful evidence about why the board should give you your license, even though you have this past conviction. One thing that I like to do with my clients is I definitely don't shy away from kind of the maybe more challenging parts of a client's case. So if they didn't disclose something on an application, or they, or if my client, had really particularly difficult convictions that they went through, I definitely don't ever try to downplay the convictions. So your testimony, you should be prepared, is not going to be easy. A lot of my clients find it to be very emotional. They're getting on the stand and telling complete strangers about basically all the worst parts of their lives. But then the flip side to that is you then also get to tell these same complete strangers about what you've done with your life since then and how you've built yourself back up. And that they also tend to find just as empowering as the first part is difficult. So we can go to the next slide. You definitely should practice with your attorney. I go through my client's testimony with them at least twice. You'll want to be sure that the communication between you and your attorney will be pretty important. Your attorney will know what facts they want to get out, and it's their job to ask questions that should get that information out on the record for you. Especially your attorney will know that you will likely be way more nervous than you expect to be. So it's kind of your attorney's job to hold your hand and make sure that they get the right things out. But you should keep in mind that your testimony will be under oath and it will be part of the public record. So in a lot of cases, you are testifying to the fact that at some point in your life you broke the law. So you'll want to think about what other legal contexts that might be an issue. Most common, part where I end up with a hesitation is particularly if my client is in actual active immigration proceedings, then it can be a little bit tricky on what to do, because we want to be very careful about admitting on the record, a violation of the law. And you'll probably want to get it, in that situation, an immigration attorney involved. So we can go to the next slide. And your character support witnesses are going to be another big part. This can take a lot of different approaches. So you can, just like with your application, you can provide letters of support and statements of support from folks who support you. It is also possible to have people actually swear in and testify on your behalf. That is usually very impactful for the judge. But you should also be aware of a few things. It is a much less controlled situation than a letter or a statement from the person supporting you, because the department's going to be able to cross-examine them. And as somebody gets nervous, you don't ever know exactly what's going to come out of their mouth. And also, if somebody's going to come testify for you, you should be prepared for them to see everything about your conviction history. So if they're not somebody that already knows a lot of the details about what you've been through, you may want to think twice about having them actually testify in person. And then after the hearing, the judge has 30 days to submit a proposed order and decision. And then after that, depending upon your specific circumstance, the department will have either another 30, 60, or 100 days to decide whether or adopt, reject, or modify the administrative law judge's order. Depending upon what happens at that point, there may be the possibility of further appeals, but at that point it gets to be a really sticky situation that you'll definitely need a lawyer for. And it is possible. What's that?
Go ahead, either you or Vinuta.
Oh, is this Vinuta? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, yes, it sure is. I'm sorry, Vinuta. I almost ran right over your slide there.
No worries. So CT did a great job talking about preparing for the denial of a license application. And if you have to go to a hearing, there's also the potential to settle the case. Those settlement offers typically involve a probationary or a restricted license, meaning that you'll get the license, but you'll have to be on probation for 3 years or 5 years, some period like that. And Oscar touched upon this as well. During that 3 to 5 year period, they'll impose terms and conditions on you. So we want you to be aware of the hidden costs. And Oscar, feel free to jump in if there's anything you'd like to add.
Luckily, I didn't have any conditions other than not being convicted or I would jeopardize my probation license if I got convicted of any other crimes.
So that's the ideal goal. What happened to Oscar is if you can get a probationary license that says stay out of trouble, follow the law, that's kind of the ideal. That's the standard for everyone. However, if, for example, in this case, this is a probationary registered nurse, these were the terms and conditions for 5 years of probation that were imposed. So there's the cost of sending the fingerprints to the board, $75, the mental and physical exams, weekly counseling, $120 per month, chemical dependency support group, $25 to $50 per session, the nursing support group, $20 per week, drug testing, which goes up significantly on the weekend. And on top of that, the probationary status is disclosed publicly on the board's website, or the BREEZE website as it's called. So adding up all the costs for this person over that 5-year probationary period, it ended up being somewhere between $5,000 to $30,000, which my clients don't have that kind of money. So accepting a deal like this was almost setting them up to fail. The other thing I want to add is, does drug testing tie to the actual conviction? So in a misdemeanor theft example, or even a felony theft example, if that's the conviction at issue, why are they asking the person to go through substance abuse testing? It doesn't make sense. There's no kind of nexus. There's no tie.
Thank you.
Also, I don't know if I could add a little.
Yeah.
With the BBS, I've known a few people who also got that probationary part. They were very limited in the work that they could do because of their restricted license. So we were always tell them, if you can fight the probation and not get that would be better. And then we found out that the BREEZE website, it says on there that it can leave those documents post your probation for up to 10 or 20 years. It's a really long time that it'll leave all of your private life public on their website.
Okay, thank you. So I want to just let you know that in the Google Drive of materials, there's a to-do list that really recaps what we've gone over in this webinar, what steps you need to follow through, and what where to go for legal help and other kinds of support. I want to clarify that when the earlier legal help we posted on in the slide, those people concentrate on clean slate remedies, clearing up your criminal record. And if you go to the AB 2138 fact sheet in the Google Drive, at the end of that fact sheet, there are a list of attorneys or legal agencies that specialize in the licensing, application, and appeal process, including our panelists. So I just wanted to draw that distinction. So I thought it's a lot of information, it's a lot of legal information, it's a lot of telling you things that can go wrong, but I'd kind of like Oscar and Heidi to talk about, what you would say to your fellow formerly convicted people about, is it worth it, and how did it feel at the end of the process?
I could go. For me, I didn't get into that career. I didn't become an insurance broker. I actually went back to organizing, which that's my passion. That's what I like or love. And so it was but it was a moral victory for me to be able to get that. And so so I did pursue it. It was a long road. It was a bit demoralizing, especially when I first got denied, and then all the stuff that I had to go through in terms of clearing up my record and getting things dismissed, and then and then that testimony that I spoke on, which I didn't want to lie, or I'm sorry, not lie is not the right word. I didn't want to disclose remorse where I didn't feel like I had any remorse. And so that's the difficult part. But again, it was a moral victory for me to get what I got. And so I think it was well worth it at the end. But it was a very long road.
Heidi?
I know I work in addiction treatment, and I get a lot of people who come out of jail and prison, and after going through addiction treatment, and other places I work, I mean, because I've worked at Homeboy Industries, I've worked at, I haven't worked, but I'm a member of ARC, but being able to say that, I've been to prison and I've had felony convictions, and now I was able to get through the hoops and the hurdle and get my BBS license. I had a lot of anxiety having to go track down all of my stuff and having to, if I see a police car behind me, I still get a little like, what's going on? What did I do? But I didn't do anything. So having to go kind of traipse back through all that trauma is not fun. But I would, for anybody who's looking into this with any license, just do what you got to do, because there's changes being made, and there's a lot of advocacy being done to change these laws so that people can get their license. Speaking specifically to becoming like a therapist, LPCC, LMFT, if you can start out as a drug counselor, no one's going to ask at your school if you've had a conviction. You may face some of the questions with different types of internships, but it's a great place to start, and then move on to get your master's degree so that you can get that license. And it's possible. It feels great once you get past that and you're able to get the license. And I'm always available for helping someone out, because I had a lot of people who helped me out, specifically a new way of life. I was scared to go, and when I finally got them to help me out, that took away a lot of anxiety, because they organized my packet for me. They organized everything and made it a lot easier for me.
Thank you. And I just want to repeat that in the chat, there's a note, Oscar and Heidi are badasses. Thank you both so much for your hard work and inspiring us. So we're going to go to question and answer. And just, I'm going to put on the screen our contact information so people can jot anything down if they want. And there was a question in the chat, is this going to be available afterwards? Yes. Everybody who registered, and of course they're attending, will get a follow-up email with a link to the recording, and we're also going to post it online. Felicia, do you want to share any questions that you see in the Q&A? And in the meantime, I'm going to start with, there were some questions in the chat about whether the massage board is covered by AB 2138 or opening a group home or a nonprofit agency. I don't know if anyone can answer that.
I do not believe the massage board is covered, but and so in general, you'll see that we responded a lot with, please refer to our referral fact sheet. A lot of the questions that were asked were very fact specific, and highly encourage you to have one-on-one conversations in terms of the board that you're specifically applying to, and your specific situation, what your rap sheet is. So please, that's on the AB 2138 fact sheet. Page 4 has the referral list. Everybody that's on there is, my understanding, free. So please reach out to those people. I know in terms of asking questions, some of the things that I field on there, and maybe CT or Vinuta can respond to, is there's several questions about exemptions and whether the Department of Social Services, it falls under AB 2138. And if it doesn't, what would be the best advice for people who are looking for an exemption?
This is CT. Yeah, I can jump in on that. So DSS criminal record exemptions are not covered by AB 2138. the the DSS process is this kind of the broadest that I've seen, in that literally anybody that has any conviction whatsoever needs to get a criminal record exemption. For some folks, that process is relatively quick. For some folks, that process is just as full-blown and takes as long as the process of getting any other license. So yeah, it's technically not a license, but from the point of applying for it and then getting denied, and having to go through the appeal process, the whole process looks exactly the same as it does for a license.
Can you share a success story?
I know of a few people who have passed the DSS process, and they were denied at first. And from my understanding is they were told to expect the denial and then the appeal would pass. And it was basically, he was trying to work in a group home for boys. And he's part of, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. He was able to get through. So it was kind of the same process, had to submit this huge packet. And this was before his BBS license, and was able to get through there. And it's something I'm possibly going to be doing. Even though I have my BBS, I still have to ask for an exemption to work in certain settings. Also, if I can add it, anyone in there that's going into an internship that might want to work at like CPS or other things would need to start this process early, because it takes a pretty long time.
I can, if there are other questions, or we can, I have a couple people with raised hands I could allow to talk.
The only thing, thank you, Heidi, for that, and did want to stress that that a lot of times what we see, like with DSSS or even employment applications, is a lot of people that once they're told no, they don't ask for the appeal, or they don't fight it, or they don't push back. And it's more, and a lot of times it's that versus actually demanding your appeal, demanding your due process, putting what we just talked about forward. So very much, what Heidi said, sometimes expect that no, but that doesn't mean it's a no. It means that, they're trying to exit people out the easy way, like the first kind of way.
I think I remember one of the attorneys saying earlier that often people don't even realize they've been denied because of a conviction. They just think they didn't get a job. Is that accurate?
You mean for ban the box? So both. Yeah, sometimes it is that you didn't get the job, but sometimes it is that's because of your conviction histories and people don't respond, right? They're like, you have 5 days to respond, and they feel like it's an automatic denial versus it being a pre-adverse, response, and they don't respond. So sometimes, your hands are tied by the times they come to us. So very much contact, these are free legal services that are there. That aren't just about occupational licensing. They're also about employment. They're also about record cleaning. They're also about other barriers that you may be experiencing.
Do you have another question from the Q&A, or should I call on somebody with a raised hand?
Yes. There were several questions regarding restitution and how does restitution play into record cleaning and occupational licensing. So that was also a theme.
I can start off. So restitution factors into criminal record clearing because the judges typically want to see that you're on a payment plan, or at least some substantial portion has been paid down before they're willing to grant that 1203.4 dismissal or expungement for you. And then in terms of occupational licensing, DSS is the most common example that comes to mind, that criminal record exemption. What they ask in their packet to the applicant is they ask you to say, what is the status of fines, fees, or restitution? So that's a very clear ask there. And it's certainly helpful if you can show that you have paid off fines, fees, and restitution for occupational licensing.
Thank you. And another common theme was questions around federal convictions and how that plays into whether those are options for record cleaning and how that plays into occupational licensing.
I can also start that one off. So there is no federal clean slate remedy as far as I'm aware. There was a bill that I believe was introduced, but I'm not sure what has happened with it. It was a representative from Delaware who introduced it. So if you do have a federal conviction, it'll still be the same process. You just won't have the benefit of like the criminal record clearance, and so you won't necessarily qualify under AB 2138 unless you have a federal pardon. But still go through it, still appeal it. Don't take it as a no, fight back and argue and submit rehabilitation.
Thank you. And then, so we talked about the referral sheets for direct consultations. One other thing was in terms of how people can get plugged in for political advocacy. So very much turning it to like Heidi and Oscar, maybe that could do some plugs on that as well.
Can you repeat the question?
For how can people get plugged in around advocacy and changing the laws when it comes to occupational licensing?
I don't do policy work, so I can't say anything about that. But yeah, maybe Rita has that answer on our end.
Well, I would say, oh, go ahead, Heidi. You go first.
Oh, I can say definitely, depending on where you live, the Time Done movement, hashtag Time Done, I'll put it in the chat. They're doing a lot of work around occupational licensing, and obviously it started in California, but this is nationwide, where this affects people, barring them from advancing or earning money or just living. So Time Done, look up the Time Done movement. If you're in LA, there's Community Coalition. All of Us Are None as well. Join All of Us Are None and become a member. The other one, Anti-Recidivism Coalition as well. If you want to join them, I'll put their names and links in the chat. There are a few great organizations that you can look up. If you've been incarcerated, you can become a member of ARC as well. And if you haven't been incarcerated or you're an ally, you can do work or volunteering with Community Coalition.
Thank you. So I know we're up on time. Rita, I'll kick it to you.
Do you have more? I could go a couple minutes over.
Yeah, so we had, so a lot of the questions very much referring people to the referral sheets and to get specific advice in terms of your situation. We spoke about like the themes about federal convictions, about restitution, and then about the exemptions. The other one is, there was one question about getting your rap sheet and how would you get your rap sheet if you're currently incarcerated? So if anybody has the answer to people who are currently incarcerated.
I will just say write to LSPC and I can, and we could send you information about how to do it through the mail. Oh, I don't know. Or anyway, we can send you the resources that are in this Google Drive, and you can contact attorneys that can help you if I can't give you the form itself.
And if they're represented by an attorney, which most people are, they're especially public defender's office, they could get the rap sheet for you as well.
And thank you both. And then one last question about when having that application, somebody said they don't understand the question about leaving something out regarding mitigating circumstances. So I think, Vinuta, that was your slide, maybe when you were talking about determining whether to leave it in or to wait until to include it, or to wait until the denial to include it. I think that's what they're referring to. If you could clarify.
Mm-hmm. So for the boards that are impacted by AB 2138 that don't ask about criminal history information, they're prohibited from asking about it. My recommendation would be to not submit any evidence about criminal history at that point. Just apply, answer all the rest of the questions about like your address, your education history, your work history, and submit it in. Let the board look at the background check that they're going to get, and they'll see the convictions. They'll see if you qualify under AB 2138 or not. If you don't qualify under AB 2138, then you can submit evidence of rehabilitation and mitigation, and there's no harm to submitting it at a later date. But if you do qualify under AB 2138, then you're not disclosing any information ahead of time. So does that make sense? Like if you're protected, don't over disclose. If you're not protected, you can always disclose at a later date. And I also wanted to add one more thing to that question about restitution and fines and fees. There was a bill that was recently passed, AB 1869, that actually will remove some criminal fees starting on July 1st, 2021. So if you do owe fines and fees, before paying them off, work with an attorney to see if you're eligible to have those fees discharged.
Sorry about the phone ringing. I'm going to take one question from a person with their hand raised, and then we're going to close. And I just want to remind this person that you are being recorded. That's for Antonio Torres. Okay, not working. So, all right. So we're going to close then. Thank you very much to all the panelists. Thank you all of you for attending. Please share the information, and if you and use those resources that we have online. You'll be getting an email with links to the resource and the recording soon. And good luck to you all.